Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I heard a beautiful statement the other day that goes as follows. التربية بالسوالف أفضل من التربية بالأوامر. Translated, it means raising a child with conversation or through conversation is better than raising a child through commands. Meaning when you have a discussion with your child and your child learns how to live through those discussions, is always more effective than a parent who all they do is command their child. They try to raise their child through commands. Do this, don't do that, you need to do this, you need to do that. And today we're going to talk about the golden question of American Muslim parents. How do I build Iman in my children? The world is going increasingly further away from Allah. And I want my child to retain Iman. What can I do? Well, I'm here to say it's actually easier than you might think. And as I go through these 3 points, remember that this is a model that can be applied to any child regardless of their age. All you need to do is tweak the point to where it has a conversation, you're able to have a conversation with your child at whatever level they are. The first of these is teaching them Allah's names and attributes. But I don't want to use the word teaching. The better word is to have conversations with your child about Allah's names and attributes, because there's nothing that instills Iman in a child more than Allah's names and attributes. The reason is because it makes Iman practical. It makes it tangible. It allows them to see the realities of Iman around them. We no longer look at a tree. The child will no longer see a tree or a bird or a mountain and simply think it's nothing more than a bird, a tree, or a mountain. But rather, this is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Its beauty comes from the beauty of Allah. There are wisdoms behind these creations. All of these are names and attributes. So for example, let's look at a young child, a child who's maybe 4 to 7 years old. You say, Baba, oh my dear son, oh my dear daughter, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Khaliq, the creator. Can you say that? Al-Khaliq? Al-Khaliq, the creator. You know what that means? They'll ask, well, no, what does that mean? You see this toy of yours? Let's say your child likes dinosaurs, or your daughter likes a Barbie doll, whatever she's playing with. You say, this human being, they were created by Allah because He is the creator. You see your dinosaurs? They were created by Allah. You know that? And they'll capture their interest. Another time you take them to the playground, they see a bird or a tree. And then you say, oh my child, do you remember that name of Allah we were talking about? Al-Khaliq, the creator. Allah created the tree. Allah created the bird. And slowly what will happen is the child will begin to not only understand who Allah is through these names and attributes, more important, so essentially, they'll begin to see Allah's names and attributes in the world around them. What happens a lot of times in religious people or people who are trying to instill piety in their children is that they cannot get out of the realm of the abstract, just the thoughts and concepts in the mind, and unable to connect that to reality. With the names and attributes of Allah, we're able to do that so easily. But you might say, my child is in his 20s or in her 20s. How can I do that? Same thing. But instead of saying in such a simple form, oh my child, Allah created the bird, Allah created the tree, have a more sophisticated conversation. Oh my child, isn't it quite phenomenal how Allah created the veins in the human body that is there's so much veins in our body that it can wrap around the earth X amount of times? This is more sophisticated. This is something that they're learning in their college. But nonetheless, the model is the same and the results, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, will be the same. So first, teach them the names and attributes of Allah. Second, the stories of our tradition. Stories of prophets, stories of the companions, stories of scholars, of the righteous people, of Salah ad-Din, of Nur ad-Din, of Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Ghazali, whoever it is. Teach them stories. And stories, any story can be taken and present it to a child in a very simple way, or present it to college and master students or PhD students in a very sophisticated way. So these models are so beautiful, these points are so beautiful. But don't just simply tell them the story. We need to go a step beyond by connecting those stories to reality. So let's say you're talking to your 4-year-old child, and you say a story happened. One time the Prophet ﷺ was by a tree, and a bird came to him complaining to the Prophet ﷺ that someone took her eggs. You tell them that story, very simple, they'll be able to understand it. But when you're out with them, in whatever context, let's say at the park, and you come by a tree, you say, "Oh my child, what does this tree remind you of?" And hopefully they'll be able to connect this thing that's in front of them, this part of their experience, what they're experiencing directly with that story. We take this story out of the realm of simply a concept, some information in their mind, and we connect it to their own day-to-day reality. Right? And so that's the second point, taking these stories and teaching your child. You might say, "Well, I don't know many stories." No problem, very easy solution. Simply Google the Prophet ﷺ with a tree, the Prophet with an animal, the Prophet and the sky, the Prophet and Adhan, companion with another companion, Sulaiman ﷺ, stories of Sulaiman. We have a huge international library that we all have access to. We just got to motivate ourselves, take some of our time out of our day, and to just learn and read. Not only are we benefiting ourselves, we're also benefiting our children. The third thing that we can do in order to instill Iman in our children is what's called reflecting and contemplating Iman. This is a little bit more tricky and requires the first two, but nonetheless it's important. Have you ever seen your child kind of just staring into the wilderness? Their mind isn't with them. They're present physically, but their mind isn't present with them. How do you normally react to that? In my experience is, "Hey son, where do you go? What's going on in your mind?" The parents tend to cut that off. The child, what they're doing is they're deep thinking. They're in deep thinking. And that deep state of thinking is important to the human being. Allah praises those who do tadhakkur and tafakkur, those who contemplate and those who think in deep thought. And so when you see your child in deep thought, don't cut them out, leave them. It's actually developing an important part of the human experience, of a human's ability to relate and to grow and to evolve into a more sophisticated individual. Let them think. But what we need to do is help our children use what they have come to learn about Allah's names and attributes and about the stories that we taught them to deep think about those things. Right? And so how we can do that is by sharing these stories, teaching them, and just following up with them, trying to connect Allah's names and attributes, these stories with the world around them, and then inshallah, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, when they go into deep thinking, they will begin to integrate Allah's names and attributes, these stories, into their thoughts. And that instills that Iman in their heart and further allows it to expand and to grow. It takes reality, the real things that they're thinking about, and now Iman is able to have a conversation with their day-to-day affairs. That's so beautiful and very simple. And we can all do it. Start by educating yourself about who Allah is, His names and attributes, about stories of the prophets and these stories of the righteous people, and then having a simple conversation with your child. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for tawfiq. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.